Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webcast. We are very excited today to be unveiling for the first time the 2016 edition of CLSA and PwC's California Life Sciences Industry Report. My name is Sarah Radcliffe, and I serve as the President and CEO of CLSA, the California Life Sciences Association. We're the leading voice for California's life sciences sector, working closely with industry, government, academia, and other stakeholders to shape public policy, drive business solutions, and grow California's life sciences innovation ecosystem. We serve over 750 biotechnology, pharmaceutical, medical device, and diagnostics companies, research universities and institutes, investors, and service providers. CLSA was founded in 2015 when the Bay Area Bioscience Association, BayBio, and the California Healthcare Institute, CHI, merged to create the state's most influential life sciences advocacy and business leadership organization. We're headquartered in California with offices in Washington, D.C., Sacramento, San Diego, and South San Francisco. Each year, we partner with our friends at PricewaterhouseCoopers to produce the California Life Sciences Industry Report, a publication that takes a holistic look at the economic and therapeutic pulse and impact of the life sciences ecosystem in California, from current employment trends, industry wages, venture capital funding levels, NIH grants, the product development pipeline, and more. This report is a time-tested and reliable resource used by legislators at the federal, state, and local levels, as well as stakeholders and opinion leaders from across the industry to make key decisions and set policy. So today, we'll highlight the important roles that biomedical R&D and manufacturing contribute to California's economy and ultimately the nationwide life sciences ecosystem. I'm pleased to be joined today by our report co-author, Peter Claude. Peter Claude is a CLSA board member and partner in PwC's Pharmaceutical and Life Sciences Advisory Division, and he'll provide you with context on what this new data means for our sector. It's our hope that by the end of this webcast, you'll have a better understanding of the current economic state of our industry and the trends to expect in the near future. If you have any questions during the presentation, please submit those into the Questions tab on the lower right side of your webinar control panel. We look forward to addressing those questions during the Q&A portion of our webcast after Peter and I report the key findings. The full 2016 California Life Sciences Industry Report is available at www.califesciencesindustry.com. A hyperlink is also included in the chat box on your control panel. Now, I'd like to turn the floor over to Peter Claude so that he can take us through the report's key findings.
Thanks, Sarah. It's always a pleasure to do this report because it makes you so excited as to what this industry means for patients, the state, and the world. So let's start with what the industry does for improving patients and medicine. Life sciences innovation has a tremendous impact on the world's health and well-being. And for decades, California has had an excellent track record producing thousands of new therapies and technologies. Many of these emerging therapies are designed to treat diabetes, cancer, the immune system, and central nervous system disorders. In 2015, California companies were shepherding over 1,200 new medicines through the product development pipeline. One thing I like to do is look back a few years when we do these presentations and see just how far we had come. And when I looked at 5 years ago, the report that we did, the number was actually 876. So almost a 50% increase in the productivity of our labs and companies here in California. Those 1,235 new drugs and new products were really focused on a number of key areas. Products that were treating terrible diseases impacting patients, families, caregivers, and healthcare systems. Number one on this list was cancer. Again, a significant increase up from the 2010, and probably one of the greatest contributors to healthcare change in the economy. Looking ahead, so what is good for the patients is also good for Californians. When you look at what the life sciences industry produces for the state of California and the people who live in it, one of the greatest contributions is in the area of employment. And in 2014, California's life sciences innovators employed more than 281,000 people. These jobs were dispersed throughout the state, with concentrations in the Bay Area of San Francisco, San Diego, Orange County, and Los Angeles. And these are good-paying jobs, too. The average salary exceeded $108,000, which is an 8% increase from the prior year, and up from almost $72,000 5 years ago. The $30 billion itself in total compensation that is paid is up almost 50% from $20 billion 5 years ago, too. So significant growth in the quality and volume of the jobs that serve the life sciences industry. The Bay Area, when you look at where those jobs are, Bay Area continues to lead the state in terms of top life sciences employment with over 63,000 jobs, followed closely by Los Angeles with almost 56,000 jobs. Right behind are Orange County and San Diego, which also contribute significantly with a combined 80,000 people employed in life sciences companies. And as you'll see in the bottom right, these jobs span the breadth of the industry: academic research, biopharmaceuticals, medical devices and diagnostics, etc. The economic impact of the life sciences business goes far beyond the companies that develop our devices, drugs, and diagnostics. Hundreds of thousands of more Californians in a variety of areas support the industry. As a result, the life sciences sector is a powerful engine for sustaining growth throughout California. And what an engine it is, a 2,848 valve turbocharged colossus. Each of those valves being one of the life sciences companies that we have here in California. That 2,800 is an increase of over 200 more than last year and almost 600 more than the 2011 report. These companies share one common trait: the desire to improve health, well-being, and the human condition. Many of them are small companies, entrepreneurial startups built on innovative technologies that could change the medical calculus for thousands or even millions of patients. So let's go down the numbers. Total revenue coming from the life sciences industry, over $130 billion. We talked about the employment there in terms of direct employment, that 281,000. But when you look at everyone who supports the industry, whether it be service providers such as myself and my team and our compatriots at our fellow companies, whether it be people here at CLSA, whether it be all the entities that serve and help the industry to be successful, we calculated that number. We called it indirect and induced employment. And the total number is 581,000. That's the amount that we estimate are all of the people whose jobs support the life sciences industry. Together, that means that almost 900,000 of the state's jobs are directly or indirectly related to the life sciences industry. So looking ahead at the engines, when you look at how we compare to the other states, the simple formula of innovative thinking, hard work, and ample funding has created a life sciences powerhouse, which continues to be a major driver throughout California. So how do we stack up against the rest of the nation? Well, we've continued to take the trend of taking the pulse of the top 15 states for biopharma and med device employment. Once again, California continues to lead the industry in growth, and this trend is expected to continue over the next year. Success, quite frankly, breeds success. The increase in year-on-year continues to be significant. When we look over the trending over the last number of years, biopharma and medical device jobs in California have grown by 6% from 2010 to 2014, an impressive jump from last year's 4% growth, and certainly a beneficiary of the awful 2008-2009 time coming out of those numbers. Biopharmaceutical and medical device employment in numerous top-ranked biotech states, including New York and New Jersey, has decreased in recent years, but grew in California. That indicates that we have a formula, it's a good formula, and it's one to make sure that we protect and sustain. Let's take a look at the breakdown of the jobs that we have in California and how the life sciences sector compares to the other high-tech areas of employment. Most people, when they think of California, think of two areas. They think of computers and internet, and they think of motion pictures. How do we compare as life sciences? Well, we are the second largest high-tech employer in California. And if you pull back the layer of the onion, you'll see that the area with the most growth that we've had over the course of the last years has been in the area of biopharmaceuticals, growing 6.6%, and in research and development, testing labs and related companies at 6.7%. At the end of the day, we must remember that life sciences is the second largest high-tech employer in California. We're outmatched only by the computer and peripheral equipment manufacturing industry, and it is that success that comes from the life sciences industry that creates such a good economic environment here in the state. So let's start looking at some of the drivers behind all of that wonderful success. Medicines, treatments, taxes, revenue, jobs, etc. Well, we'll drill into that. In labs throughout the state, California's academic researchers attract billions of dollars in grants from the National Institutes of Health, the NIH, and other entities. The intellectual firepower of our leading research institutions translates into innovative science, which in turn attracts federal grant money. As I mentioned earlier, California received over $3.7 billion in NIH funding, which, as you can see here, outpaces all states. In 2014, California labs were awarded over 7,300 grants from the NIH, which drives the cutting-edge research, which creates the companies that we talked about in the prior slide. Massachusetts is the second most active state, with over 4,700 grants awarded in 2015. Where are those grants going? They're going to our wonderful academic medical institutions. UC San Francisco, Stanford, and UC San Diego lead the pack, bringing in a combined $1.3 billion in NIH funding, more, in fact, than several states, and several states even combined. The state also leads in NIH small business innovation research and small business technology transfer grants, with $144 million of those grants coming into the state to help fund innovation and help our scientists take ideas from thought to products. So speaking more about those fantastic academic institutions that are drawing those NIH grants, California's life sciences industry is built on and fueled by world-class universities and groundbreaking life sciences research. Similar to last year, the Shanghai Index has 11 of the top 100 schools in California. That's one state in one country. New York is the next closest with 4. Our institutions are as you would expect them to be: Stanford, Berkeley, Caltech, UCLA, and the UCs in San Diego, San Francisco, Santa Barbara, Irvine, Davis, and Santa Cruz, and of course USC. California's excellent academic infrastructure is reflected in the total number of life sciences doctorates awarded each year. In 2013, which is the latest data we have, nearly 1,300 life sciences doctoral degrees were awarded at the time. It is those doctorates that help us to create the ideas that attract the grants and ultimately create the companies and the jobs and the medicines. It's not just brains, though, that are required for this success to happen. California's academic excellence generates those innovations that we talked about. But those basic science discoveries funded by the NIH or by personal discovery do not stay in the laboratory. They're often licensed to pharmaceutical companies, biotech firms, and startups who are also creating their own products and new ideas and innovations. In many cases, the scientists who make these discoveries start their own companies to carry the research forward, creating more jobs. The good news is that California continues to lead the way in venture capital investment. California companies are projected to attract more than $4.7 billion in life sciences investment, which is a sharp increase from the $3.6 billion received in 2014. When you look at where that funding is coming in the stage of the companies, it's nice to see some recovery in the biotech seed funding and the strength in early stage. We continue to watch closely the medical device funding as well, with expansion stage companies receiving the most in funding year on year from venture capitalists. Life sciences VC investment is third only to the software and media entertainment industries in California, and is a significant contributor to the fact that California is projected to take over 60% share of all VC investments in the U.S. in 2015. Those venture capitalists are attracted by the value that's created out of the industry. In 2015, we've seen a healthy level of life sciences M&A deals with about 27 mergers and acquisitions producing almost $1.2 billion in capital release. There were also 16 life sciences IPOs filed in 2015, totaling $122 billion of capital into these emerging companies. Both of these last points highlight the attractiveness of the sector in California to venture capitalists. But that attractiveness is not unique to California. In third quarter 2015, we saw historical highs in venture capital funding for the life sciences industry at $2.9 billion across the country, with the interesting insight that California and Massachusetts were roughly equally funded at almost $1 billion apiece. So now that you've had the chance to see the highlights and the key findings from our 2016 Life Sciences Industry Report, I'd like to turn things back over to Sarah Radcliffe, CLSA's President and CEO, to walk us through the public policy implications in Washington, Sacramento, and at the local levels on the life sciences industry.
Thanks so much, Peter. And I'd like to remind everyone, if you have a question, please submit those into the Questions tab on the lower right side of your webinar control panel. So what does all this mean? As you've just seen, the statistics of this report validate the breadth and quality of our life sciences community.
To some, the California life sciences innovation ecosystem may look like it's on autopilot. Each year, the state produces excellent research, attracts new investment, and develops a variety of new therapies and other products. But this success was hard-won and will be difficult to maintain. Academic institutions, investors, business leaders, advocacy organizations, and state and federal policymakers must all work in concert to ensure our continued success. A word of caution is always in order. Past performance does not guarantee future results. So while California's life sciences sector has done well, we face increasing competition from other states and nations. And decision makers in Washington, Sacramento, and California localities will continue to play key roles. At CLSA, we advocate with opinion leaders at all of these levels. At the federal level, for example, we advocate that federal policies must support, recognize, and reward the value of innovation. We understand that there's a growing theme in the public, among the public, that new products, particularly new medicines, are expensive and may be of questionable usefulness. We agree with those who say that the system must focus on value, specifically value for patients. We must all work together to create a system that's ready to advance the pioneering discoveries in the pipeline here in California to create new medicines and other products. And what better time to do this as we see the advances in big data, digital health, personalized medicine, and precision medicine right here in California. At the federal level also, we must maintain robust intellectual property and patent protections. For many of our entrepreneurs, a patent is the asset that they have to attract investments. And so we remain very concerned about proposals that would limit their ability to defend their intellectual property and use it to create pioneering products. We think a lot about how to bolster NIH funding and support predictable and efficient FDA regulatory processes. At the federal level, we were very pleased to see the 21st Century Cures Act pass with a healthy margin of 344 to 77 in the House. This piece of legislation has important provisions to advance the development of antibiotics in the face of antimicrobial resistance, to foster the development of treatments and cures for rare diseases and for pediatric conditions, to enhance communication during the review process between the sponsors and the Food and Drug Administration, to advance the validation of biomarkers that can enable accelerated approval of important products, and to enable FDA scientists to collaborate with their counterparts outside the agency. The action now moves to the Senate, and we hope very much that the Senate will pass similar legislation and get something to the President's desk for him to sign. It's also essential that our California state legislature produce policies that support the life sciences. For example, supporting higher education, supporting tuition levels at universities, increasing STEM funding, beginning with great new programs in schools so that talented young people are prepared to enter the life sciences sector, and fostering a better tax, regulatory, and lawsuit climate. Fostering innovation. Drug price controls don't work, and they can limit access to quality care for patients. At the local, county, and city government levels through California, we applaud municipalities that are working to attract great life sciences organizations within their borders, and we express concerns about proposals that would make it more difficult for those organizations to do business and attract investment so that they can contribute to the great pioneering treatments and cures of tomorrow. While the news is good, it could always be better. By working together to improve public policy, we can accelerate the pace of innovation and help more people. So at this point, I'd like to move to considering your questions. Again, if you have questions, please submit those into the Questions tab on the lower right side of your webinar control panel. And as we transition into the Q&A section, I'd like to turn once again to Peter Klott, our co-author, to provide some high-level takeaways from the 2016 report and what these mean for our treasured life sciences sector. Peter?
Thanks, Sarah. There's a not-so-secret formula to success, and the slides are deliberate in showing how that success happens. All of the terrific benefits that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation, jobs, GDP, taxes, treatments, devices, innovation, it all comes from the simple recipe of intellect, capital, an industry-friendly environment, and a cultural willingness to take risk. This formula, although fragile and replicable, has been remarkably resilient through downturns and regulatory changes. So it remains critical that we keep those drivers of success in mind and nurture them to ensure the continued success of California life sciences industry for both patients and the state. While it's only 1 quarter of data, I think it's interesting that Massachusetts was able to obtain the same amount of venture funding at $1 billion that we in California have. I think it's something that we need to pay attention to, in addition to all the points that you mentioned, in order to be able to make sure that the leadership in the state and the attractiveness of the state for both talent and funding continues to generate the same kind of return that we have generated in the past.
Thank you. And we have our first question. In terms of the medical device space, what does this report tell us about how the industry is doing in California?
So the report covers both. It covers the life sciences industry, but as you look through the slides and when you get a copy of the report, you'll be able to see the data that's in there around medical devices. In medical devices, it continues to be a very strong performance. We don't have the same level of data as we do for pharmaceutical companies in terms of the products that are in development, so that's why some of that commentary may have seen on the pharmaceutical side. But when you look at medical devices, the growth in jobs continues to be strong over the period of time. That's when you include both the research and development, the testing labs, along with medical devices, instrumentation, and diagnostics. What you do see is that funding continues to be, I think, an issue, especially with seed growth companies. As you look on the slide that talks about the attractiveness of investment, what we certainly look for is the continued innovation in the medical device side of the house to be able to drive greater and greater funding to this area. It's been difficult for these companies to get the seed-based funding, and that's, of course, an area for us in concern as part of CLSA to make sure that we can do what is necessary to be able to help those companies succeed.
Thank you, and I'm going to add to that and combine my answer with the answer to the next question, which is what would CLSA consider a good, better tax climate? So one of the taxes that we are extremely concerned about is the medical device tax. This is a 2.3% medical device tax, which is hampering innovation and investment in research and development. As we said, California is home to over 1,000 medical device manufacturers employing many people with great wages. The tax is expected to extract nearly $25 billion from device firms, and it's already having an adverse impact on R&D investment and job creation, jeopardizing our position as a global leader in medical device innovation. A recent survey of medical device manufacturers indicates that the tax has precluded both large and small companies from hiring thousands of people, causing the loss of jobs and reducing manufacturer R&D budgets. So we have advocated and will continue to advocate for the repeal of the medical device tax. In addition, we support the research and development tax credit, and we look across the national and state levels at ensuring that taxes are not burdensome to the future of innovation in our life sciences sector. And I think we're ready to move to the next question. How can we support biomedical manufacturing so it stays in California and continues to support the industry?
So biomedical manufacturing being both a capital-intensive activity and also a fairly long-term activity, it's not something that you just pick up and move after making the investment, gets to, I think, the points that Sarah talked about earlier. It is the state and the federal government working together to make sure that the regulation of those entities is streamlined and is not duplicative in terms of the approach. I think it's also looking at the level of manufacturing. You know, the points that Sarah mentioned around policy, especially in the area of tax, are important to be able to sustain that manufacturing. Those are very capital-intensive, job-intensive functions, and of course something that, as we've looked at employment over the years, manufacturing in the area of California has stayed fairly stable, but certainly something that I think that, you know, from a CLSA standpoint, we view as a priority to keep here.
All right, the next question. What's driving the growth in the number of drugs in development? Is it new companies or established companies?
That's an interesting question. I don't have a lot of good data on where that's coming from, to be honest. The number of companies, the growth in the number of companies year on year, when you think about, if you go back to 2010, moving from an increase of 600 companies in biomedical industry here in California, and then you take the fact that the growth in the number of molecules or services under development, products under development, and again, this is only life sciences, the biotech side of things, is up 400. This tells me that it's a little bit of both. We certainly see anecdotally an increasing number of emerging biotech companies that you can see in the venture capital funding is supported in terms of that growth. So I think it's a mix of both, but it's difficult for us to tell, given the data, how much of it is new companies versus established companies.
All right, thank you. Our next question, in thinking about the current discourse on drug pricing, compounded by election year politics, how do you think this latest round of focus on price and value will ultimately impact the industry? Anything unique to California? As I've said, we remain very concerned about the current discourse on drug pricing and are working hard to ensure that in that discourse there's an appropriate focus on value and innovation for patients. As I said, we agree with those who say that we need to move to value-based reimbursement. Our CEOs are ready to be held accountable for making products that really make a difference for patients. But when we think about what kind of system that would be, it is a system that focuses first on producing cures and treatments, and second on pricing. Because the issues of pricing that have arisen in the recent past, I think when you look at them, they're really more about financing than about pricing. The products that have engendered the greatest controversy, frankly, have been products that are extraordinary advances that are able to turn chronic and very unpleasant conditions for patients into either a thing of the past, that is to say they are cures, or able to really change the landscape of survival. So for example, cancer products that have caused the survival rate to go from the single digits to well into the double digits. And so we're ready to engage in that debate with the public about value and pricing. But we think it's very important that that debate be balanced and focused on how we can continue to attract investment into this sector so that we can sustain innovation into the future and capitalize on, as I said, the extraordinary advancements that are happening right here in California as our sector intersects with the tech sector. So I do think California plays a special role in that debate, and it will be a major topic of discussion next year in our election year. Our next question, how do you think that the open biotech IPO window has specifically impacted California? How much longer will it last? And how will changes in it impact California down the road?
Okay, so those are several questions. I'll take the first one. The open biotech window and the impact on California, it has had a tremendous impact on California. And I'll tie that into the response to the third part of the question, which is how will changes in it impact California down the road. The impact is clear in terms of the attractiveness of the sector to venture capitalists. People invest money with the expectation that there will be a return. And the ability to unlock that capital and deploy it on other companies and create new companies is dependent on the ability of companies to be, of venture capitalists to be able to have an exit. And that exit is clearly in the IPO area. So when we think about the IPO, we think about the attractiveness of California to capital, which, as I talked about earlier, is an integral part of the formula to success. We see that as being, the biotech window as being a significant driver of growth over the next year and a couple of years. How long will it last? I have no idea. We have had a series, if you look back over the last 10 years, we've had booms and busts. I think we can only hope that the boom will last into perpetuity, but we know that will never be the case.
All right. Our next question, could you discuss the indirect and induced jobs numbers more? How does that differ from direct jobs?
Sure, happy to. So I'll draw a simple comparison. Someone who works for a life sciences company, we're sitting here in lovely South San Francisco, so I can look around and see Exelixis and Onyx and Genentech up the hill, so just a couple of examples, Cytokinetics, basically anybody I can see out the window. People who work for those companies, those are what we would call direct employees. And what happened was that we were sitting around a couple of years ago and we said, you know what, I wouldn't be, talking to the CEO at the time, I wouldn't be in California if it weren't for the life sciences industry. Neither would Sarah, neither would Will. We might be someplace else. But we're here because the life sciences industry is the industry that we choose to help in doing what it does so well for medicine and for the economy. So the fact that we are here, and we think about the others, the software designers, other consultants, intellectual property attorneys, communications professionals, everyone who supports each of these companies and helps them to be successful and to do their jobs. Those are the folks that we categorize as indirect or induced employment. So I'm one of the indirect and induced, Sarah is indirect and induced. We felt that it was appropriate because when you think about it, the industry does not operate in a vacuum in California. There are people who work directly for the companies and those who support those folks. We didn't go as far as the dry cleaners, to whom they might be sending their clothes, but we did take that first couple of steps beyond the direct employees to figure out who really owes their jobs to the industry.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I think we have time for one more question. So next question, hold on one moment, we're just scrolling to it. All right, can you say more about big data and life sciences companies? How far along? Issues encountered? Biggest player in the intersection of big data and the life sciences. So yes, we are fortunate, again, sitting here in South San Francisco to be really at a global hub of the intersection between big data and life sciences companies, given that we have Silicon Valley just across the way here. So it's a really exciting time. How far along? It's very far along. We see companies that have been founded on big data and are making huge progress. But yes, there are issues that are encountered. I think apart from the technical issues, which will be overcome, one of the most interesting aspects of the intersection between big data and the life sciences is the regulatory issues that remain to be resolved. The kinds of products that we can come forward with are so novel that the Food and Drug Administration and other bodies are not ready to regulate these kinds of products. And so we see a lot of questions arising, particularly about how the information that's generated through the use of big data should be conveyed to patients. What levels of evidence are required before results rise to the level that patients can be informed of them. And we see a very interesting debate in the public about the rights of individuals to receive information that may not be completely clear and may not be completely validated. So this is a very interesting area. Obviously, our interest within the life sciences sector is to make sure that this advances the development of great products. It helps patients to get the information that they need to understand their state of health and increase their well-being. We have great hopes for the promise that this information has for our industry and look forward to addressing some of these regulatory and public perception concerns. All right, and I am being told that we have time for another question. So, can you speak to areas where, areas within biotech and medical devices which are as yet untapped natural partnerships?
Sure, I'll take a stab at that one. So when I think about the areas, when I think about collaborations between biotech and medical device, there's the natural ones that everyone is aware of around the personalized medicine approaches in the testing and tests and diagnostics. But when I think about medical devices, I'll think about it broadly, which is not just your traditional medical device realm, but also what we would call new entrants, which are companies currently that are not healthcare companies, but who have consumer devices and consumer solutions that can be repurposed for producing a better result for patients, either as a result, in combination with another device or with a pharmaceutical product. Here I think about the benefits that come from better patient experience, whether it be clinical trial remote monitoring, whether it be the ability to better measure how the patient responds mentally, physically, in addition to the ability for it to have an impact on the actual disease state. And looking also for a better result. So when it comes to, one of my favorite is someone who had congestive heart failure who then leaves the hospital, goes straight into in and out for a double-double, animal style, of course. And the impact that can have on it, impact that can have on the ultimate success of the treatment. the ability of consumer devices, consumer software to be a quasi-medical device and provide a better information to the patient as to what they should and should not be doing, as well as to the caregiver to help them adapt when behavior is perhaps not the best in terms of delivering the kind of outcome or result that is desired. So I think that there continues to be a number of ways that medical devices and biotech can collaborate. And what I think is really a growing area are all of these companies who are quasi-medical devices that will be able to create a better result for both a device and a pharma company.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks especially to my co-author, Peter Claude, and thank you all for joining us today. We hope you found today's webcast to be useful. If you haven't had a chance to check out the full report, please visit www.califescienceindustry.com, or a link to the report is available in your webinar control panel. Also, if you have any questions that we were unable to address in this webcast, please send them to Rosa Sadney, who is our communications manager here at CLSA. His email address is wzasadny@califesciences.org. A recording of this webinar will be available on www.califescienceindustry.com next week. From all of us here at CLSA and PwC, I'm Sarah Radcliffe, and thank you very much for joining us today for this launch of the 2016 Life Sciences Industry Report.